This is a story about reading assessment validity. Validity. Does the instrument provide an accurate measure of what it purports to measure? Once upon a time, I was working in a special ed resource room with students who were reading at beginning levels. Before I began working with them in the fall, I administered an informal reading inventory as a diagnostic and to get a sense of their reading levels as well. For the next several months, daily instruction included language experience activities, cloze activities, writing activities, word building, fluency, and reading practice. For reading practice, we used books that students liked. These books had interesting topics with lots of pictures, color. They had appropriate sentence-to-picture ratios, and students could read them successfully. As well, students were given choices about what books they wanted to read. Observations and simple progress monitoring measures indicated that these students seemed to be making good progress. They enjoyed reading, they were reading more fluently, reading for meaning instead of sounding out words, and talking about the books they read. In short, they had become readers. After 3 months, I decided to quantify what I was seeing. So, individually, I pulled students out of the environment we had used for reading and writing and took them into a larger room with fewer distractions. For the informal reading inventory, I plopped a page down in front of them that consisted of text with no pictures. Then I asked them to perform. "Read this," I said. "What's wrong with this picture?" I could tell by the nonverbals, something that would not show up on a standardized test, that something was wrong. It was obvious that students did not want to be there. I had pulled them from an environment in which they felt comfortable, where their friends and teacher were. I asked them to do something that was not fun. The text used for the informal reading inventory had no color, no pictures, and were not interesting to them. They were just words printed on a black and white page. Students were not able to use picture clues, like we had taught them to do, to help them create meaning. And I became another testing person, making them do things to show what they could not do. Seeing the negative reactions from the first 3 students, I shut down this process immediately. The results were disastrous. These students seem to have become worse readers after all our hard work together. After a little thinking, I reassessed my assessment. I needed to make a change. Instead of using commercially prepared informal reading inventories, I decided to do a miscue analysis with the books we had been using for reading in class for the last 3 months. I recorded them reading these books in the classroom where they were taught. I also created story retelling charts based on these books to assess comprehension. And when I was, quote, testing them, unquote, I gave them a choice of 2 books to read. I asked them, do you want to read this book or that book? It was only a choice between 2 books, but it was a choice, very much like they were used to. My readers magically appeared. I saw an increase in meaningful miscues and self-corrections when compared with their fall measurements. This told me that students were reading for meaning and improvements were being made in their metacognitive abilities. The scores on the story retelling charts showed that students were doing a better job of creating meaning with what they read. Also, the reading fluency and prosody that I observed during instructional sections returned. These improvements could have been due to the intervention used, the type of material used for assessment, maturation and increased engagement with authentic literary experiences, or a combination of all. The fact was they were making important steps in their literacy journey. There are 2 lessons here. First, when assessment looks different from instruction and practice, you will get results that underrepresent students' actual ability. Removing a reading event from its meaningful context during assessment creates an artificial non-reading event. A valid assessment for reading should look to the greatest extent possible, like real reading. And second, student assessment of any kind always occurs within the sociocultural, emotional, and experiential context. These variables must be considered when examining results. And they all lived happily ever after.